Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes pretty fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Welcome, everyone, to the Straight Shift. We are heading into spring finally, and it's what I call used car buying season, or inexpensive used car buying season. The reason is because people will hopefully start getting some tax refunds over the next month or two, and it's very common for folks to use that money to buy an inexpensive used car for themselves or for their teenager, or to use it as a down payment on a more expensive car. I've been shopping a lot for used cars. I was just down at a local dealership today looking at one for a client for his two teenagers. And I've got a couple other new clients that I just took on who hired me because they were not happy with the value that they were being quoted for their current cars as a trade-in when trying to buy a new one. So I thought I would do a two-part series on buying and selling used cars. There's just so much to talk about in this arena. So this episode will be about what is your car really worth? What is kind of the day in the life of a used car, and how to get the most money for your trade vehicle when you're buying another car. And then in 2 weeks, we'll kind of look at it from the other side and say, okay, what if you're shopping for a used car? What do you need to look for? How are they priced? What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when shopping for used cars that can get them into some very, very serious financial trouble? So let's start with, what is your car really worth? I had a client he took his car to I'm not going to name any names, but one of those big independent car dealerships that tells you that they'll buy your car even if you're not going to buy one from them. And he got a quote, and he wasn't real happy with it. He looked at that quote compared to Kelley Blue Book and thought, geez, my car is really, they only gave me $12,000 on a quote for it, but Kelley Blue Book says it's worth over $16,000. What gives? So the first thing I want to do is set a little bit of a expectation and reality check around this whole concept of Kelley Blue Book. Kelley Blue Book doesn't actually mean squat. Hate to tell you, but it really doesn't. None of the book values really do. They have some algorithms, they do a bunch of math, and they come up with estimates and ranges of what a car with a certain year, make, mileage options, etc., may be worth in the market. Sometimes it's fairly accurate, sometimes it's not. And they give you multiple values on that web screen. If you've ever gone to kbb.com to see how much your car's worth, they're going to give you a lot of different numbers, and that can be confusing. In this case, this person was confused because he was looking at the Kelley Blue Book retail values. The retail value is the value that you would expect to pay for a car if you were buying it. That's what the dealer is hoping to sell it for after he has taken it from you on trade, paid you whatever, and then done whatever to recondition the car. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that process looks like a little bit later in this podcast. But what you need to look for are the trade-in values, or we in the business call them wholesale values, or ACV, actual cash value. And actual cash value means, what are they really selling for wholesale, at the auctions where dealers buy thousands of used cars from each other every year. When you're looking at Kelley Blue Book, if you're going to look at it, obviously take it with a grain of salt. It is just a guesstimate. You need to be looking at the trade-in price and look at the fair price, not the good or the excellent, because I'm sorry, very few cars fall into the good or excellent category. I know you love your car. You're very attached to it. You think it's been the most wonderful car, but you probably love it a lot more than other people will love it. So you may not be being objective. It's sort of like you like your children a lot more than other people might like your children. So you need to kind of look at your used car from the perspective of some stranger looking at it to buy it, not from your beloved standpoint of this car has been, a part of your life for several years. Most cars fall into that fair range. Some even fall into the poor range, not because they haven't been taken care of or they're real beaters or anything, but simply because they have a lot of miles on them for the year. So there's a lot of different things that go into the value of a used car. And when you're looking at Kelley Blue Book values, you have to be realistic. Kind of look on the lower range of what Kelley Blue Book tells you, and that might be a little bit more accurate. But the biggest problem is Kelley Blue Book doesn't actually buy cars. You cannot call up someone at Kelley Blue Book and get them to stroke a check to you for the amount of money they say on their website that your car is worth. It just doesn't work that way. It's just a guesstimate based on a bunch of algorithms, and it may not accurately reflect the current market values in your area. So let's look at what is a day in the life of a used car and what factors really determine what your car is worth. The first thing we have to look at is the different venues for buying and selling cars. You've got your private party selling. So if you were to list your car on AutoTrader or Craigslist, or buy one from someone else, that's a private party transaction. You also have your franchise dealerships. That's your Honda store, your Toyota store, your Ford store. These are the big dealerships that are literally franchises of the manufacturer. It's a franchise just like McDonald's, just a little bit bigger and without the fries. And finally, you have independent dealers, and that can be anything from your little, Bubba's Used Cars down the road to, something as big as a CarMax. Those are all independent dealers, meaning they're not associated with or a franchise of a manufacturer, and they sell used cars, not new ones. The franchise dealers are the ones that sell the new cars. So when you're going to trade in your car, and let me take a minute and pause on that. The term trade-in, that is an industry term that the automotive industry has kind of created to make you forget that what you're actually doing is selling your car. You are selling your current vehicle. It's sort of like how the casinos have you use those little chips when you play on their tables instead of just using real money, because they want you to forget that you're using real money. It's kind of the same concept. So, we don't take the concept of trading in quite as seriously as we might take the concept of selling. But that is what you are doing, and it's how you need to look at it. So when you go to, let's just say that you have a really nice, 3-year-old Honda and you're trading it in on a new Toyota. You're going to switch brands. So you go to the Toyota store with your nice Honda. It's, only got 30,000 miles on it. You've kept it in good shape. You think they should really give you top dollar for it. And theoretically, maybe they should. But one of the things that they're going to look at is how easily can they resell your car? When a dealer buys your trade vehicle from you, they are going to do one of two things. They're either going to keep it for their lot and resell it to another customer at a markup after they've done a certain amount of reconditioning, like they'll usually do an oil change, filter changes. If it needs any mechanical work like new brakes, new tires, they'll do that in most cases and get it all detailed, shiny, and then they will sell it at a profit. And that's what makes up the difference between the wholesale price they're paying you for it versus the retail price that they're selling it. That's just the nature of going from a wholesale price to a retail price. But that dealer has to assess whether or not they can sell your car on their lot. And it may be a really great car, but the Toyota store may not be able to sell a slightly used Honda for as high of a price that the Honda dealership next door can, because they can certify it and sell it as a Honda certified pre-owned car. And if you were going to shop for a slightly used Honda, are you more likely to go to the Honda dealership or the Toyota dealership to find a Honda? Therefore, you're probably going to get less money for that Honda as a trade at a Toyota store than you would if you traded it at the Honda store. But here's the great thing. there's nothing that says you have to just trade in the vehicle to sell your car to the dealership that you're buying your new car from. You can sell it to anybody you want. Now, it can get a little tricky if you've got negative equity on a loan that you've got to roll over, but we'll worry about that another day. Let's just say that you want to sell it outright, and there's no reason you can't go next door to the Honda store and say, hey, I am just looking to sell outright my vehicle. Would you be interested in it for your lot? Another option to get you a little more money for it is to find some nice independent car dealers that have the higher end or nicer cars, or honestly, any car that is around the same year in mileage that your car is. So find a dealer that sells the type of cars that you have to sell, and they might be more willing to buy it for their lot. The independent dealers have a harder time finding good cars for their lots because they don't get as many trade-ins. They don't have access to all the same auctions that the franchise dealers do. There are auctions and lanes at auctions that only the franchise dealers are allowed to go to and buy cars. So the little independent guys tend to be left scrambling trying to find good cars. And as a result, if you walk onto their lot and say, hey, look what I got for sale, they might be like, ooh, I want that. And they will pay you more money for it. I have literally gotten $1,500 more for a client's trade, selling it to one of the independent dealers that I know who really wanted it for his lot. And he paid a little more than wholesale because it saved him the trouble of going to auction to try and find one. Versus the Mazda dealer that we were buying her new car from because they couldn't sell a slightly used Honda on their lot. So it was literally a $1,500 difference just selling it to a dealer that wanted it and knew they could sell it on their lot versus the dealer that kind of felt, meh, it's a nice car, but I can't do much with it. If the dealer's not going to keep it for their lot, they're going to take it to auction and try and sell it, in which case the price that they offer you for it will be below wholesale, because not only do they buy it from you, but now they've got to transport it to the auction house. They've got to pay a few $100 in auction fees to sell it there, and then hope they might make a little bit of money on it. So the value of your trade can vary by, $2,000, sometimes even $3,000, depending on what that dealership intends to do with it and what they can do with it. So shopping your, quote, trade vehicle to the right dealership can put a lot more money in your pocket than just trying to negotiate it as a trade at wherever you're buying your new car from. So that is a huge, huge factor that you need to consider. It takes a little more of your time to shop around and do that research and take it to a few different dealers in town to see who's going to put money on it. But it can be worth it. If it's a difference of a few $100, no, it may not be worth your time to do that. But if it's a $1,500 difference, if that takes a few hours of your time, that might be worth it to you. So that's just something to consider. What really kind of determines the base value of your car, obviously, what year is it? The older your car is, the less it is worth, unless it's a classic or specialty car, in which case you're probably not going to be using that as a trade-in anyway. And up north, where you have winter and the cars age faster, so to speak, because of all the rust, that year is even more important. They depreciate more in the north than they do down here in the south. The make and model makes a difference. Some cars simply hold their value better than others. I'm shopping right now for a used Toyota 4Runner, and my client was very surprised at the year and mileage we were going to have to look at to get it into his $20,000 budget. And I said, well, 4Runners hold their value ridiculously well. So if you're selling one of these cars, that's great. Be sure you are getting top dollar for it. Don't let the dealer completely lowball you. We call that stealing the trade. Simply because, hey, this is a desirable car in the market. I know what it's worth, and you should be able to command good money for it, assuming it's in good condition. The other big one is mileage. Obviously, the higher the mileage, the lower the value. And there are certain milestones kind of where the car's value drops a little more exponentially, kind of like goes off a little cliff. And that is right after the factory warranty expires. That's kind of the first little dip down. And then at 100,000 miles, that's a pretty big dip for most cars. Not necessarily the Toyota 4Runner, but in general, people kind of see that 100,000 mile mark and they get a little nervous buying a used car with over 100,000 miles on it. Therefore, that value drops at that point. And obviously, again, at like 150,000, 200,000, you're going to see those drops in the value at those milestones. But it also depends on how good a condition your car is. A good dealer is really going to look at it very thoroughly. And if you have kept up with your maintenance, done all your oil changes, cleaned your car regularly, it looks nice, it runs great, you haven't been in any accidents, because believe me, they're going to run a Carfax on it to see, what the history of that car has been. And, if you've kept it clean, you've not smoked in it, you're going to command higher dollar for that car. They're also going to look at the current market conditions and the time of year. Convertibles are worth more in the spring and summer than they are in the fall and winter, for example. So depending on the type of car you have, there may be some cyclical values to that car and better times and worse times a year to sell that car. And finally, I said, the type of dealership it is and how much money they're going to be able to put on that car based on whether they want it and need it for their lot and how much they think they can sell it for, and if it's worth it to them to go through the reconditioning process. And if you show up with a beater that they're going to have to, bang out a lot of dents and paint body panels, they're not going to waste their time doing that. It's just not worth it to them. Whereas a smaller dealer that specializes in just inexpensive cars that are far from perfect, he might be okay with it, because he's not going to do that much to recondition it anyway, because his customers, are not as picky. They're looking for something, more budget focused, and, a ding and the scratches here and there aren't huge deals. So these are the things that are going to affect the value of your trade. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of reconditioning that dealers do to the cars and some things that you can do while you're owning your car to make sure that you're maximizing its resale value when that time comes. I'll be right back. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a fair price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 888-575-2138. That's 888-575-2138. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
Ah, the Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
And we're back talking about used cars. This podcast is going to be the first in a two-part series talking about the value of used cars, how to sell them, and how to buy them. Today, we're talking about how to sell your used car and get the most money for it on, quote, trade, or if you're just selling it privately. And in 2 weeks, my next podcast will take a look at it from the other side. We're going to look at how do you buy a good quality used car? What are the things to look for and how to avoid buying a lemon? So we've talked today about the different types of dealerships and the things that they consider when they are putting a value on your car that you are trading in, or as I said, you are selling to them. So let's look at, what really makes up the difference between the money that they pay you for it, so the trade allowance or what they purchase it from you for, versus, what happens when they turn around and sell it to the next customer at a markup. What goes into that? So let's just take an example and say that you sold your trade vehicle to a dealer for $10,000. And then 2 weeks later, you look on his website and you see your car for sale on his website for $14,999. $995. Thinking, holy cow, he only gave me $10,000 for it, and he's asking nearly 15. What the heck? Did he cheat me? Well, not necessarily. First of all, he's a retail dealer and he does need to make some sort of profit or it's not worth him being in business. Dealerships are businesses, they're not charities. So they are going to make a profit. But there's a lot of things that go into taking a car from when you trade it in to when they then resell it to a retail customer on their lot. And I said before the break that they're going to look at a lot of different things. It's not just the year and the make and the mileage of the car. They are looking at the car's condition. How good of a shape is it in? And when I'm shopping around my clients' trades to different dealers, because that's part of what I do in my service, I give them as much detailed information as I possibly can. Because here are the big things that they care about. Number one, has the car been in an accident? They are going to run a Carfax on it. At least any good dealer is going to run a Carfax on it because they want to know, what is the history on this car? Has it been in any accidents? Is the title history clean? Has it been in a flood? They are worried about the same things about buying a used car as you are. So they're going to be sure to run that Carfax and see what the history is, especially if you're not the first owner and you may not know the car's complete history. So they're going to look into that, and that's going to factor into the value. If there is a ding on the Carfax report for having been in an accident, depending on how severe that accident was and the way that dealership buys and sells used cars, that may be a deal breaker for them in terms of keeping it on their lot. They're like, ooh, well, it's been in an accident and it was a pretty big one, so it's not a car we're going to keep for our lot. It does not meet our quality standards. Just as a car like that would not meet my quality standards for buying one. So be aware of what your car's history is. And they're going to look at, well, what does it need mechanically? Most dealers are going to do a basic reconditioning on their cars. They're going to do an oil and filter change, maybe wipers. And then they're going to look at the rest of the car and see, what does it need to either make it pass inspection or at least, make it safe for in states that don't have inspections. Because most of your good, honest dealers, they're not going to want to put a car on their lot that's dangerous. Now, does that mean they're going to do every little thing that car completely needs to make it brand spanking new maintenance wise? No, not usually, unless it's a certified pre-owned vehicle or, a higher end, more expensive car, because they can't spend that money to do everything to make it absolutely perfect if they're only going to be able to resell it for $15,000. For example, the 4Runner that I looked at today, it's got a good maintenance history. It looks like it's been well cared for. All the fluids were really clean. It's got a few paint chips in the hood, a couple scratches down the driver's side. The dealer touched those up. They did try and buff it out. They tried to make it look as good as possible, but there's only so much you can do. And quite frankly, a black SUV with 87,000 miles on it, that's basically a brick driving down the highway in black paint. It's going to show chips and scratches. It's just never going to be perfect. And, at the, $18,000 price tag they had on it, they couldn't make it absolutely perfect. And that's okay. At that mileage, I wasn't expecting it to be perfect. And it's for two teenage boys, so it's not like it'll stay perfect anyway. But they're going to look at those cosmetic things. They're going to look at the reconditioning. On this 4Runner, it needed new brakes. So they did do brakes all the way around. So that cost them nearly $1,000. When a dealer does reconditioning of their used cars in their own shop, a lot of people think, oh, well, they're just doing it so it doesn't really cost them any money. That's not true. The service shop at a dealership is an independent profit center. And so they still charge the sales department for their work. They charge a little less than they charge to retail service customers, but not by a lot, because they still have to buy the parts. They still have to pay their mechanic. They're still using the shop's equipment and electricity and supplies. So the sales department does have to actually pay the service department to service and recondition these cars for resale. So don't assume that just because the dealer's doing the work means it's not costing them any money. It is. So this dealer put, front and rear brakes, pads and rotors on this 4Runner. So there's $1,000 right there. maybe it needs tires. This 4Runner, the tires were about a third tread remaining. So in this price range, they didn't put new tires on it. But if you're selling them your used car and you got 4 bald tires on it, they're going to take that into account when they give you a value, because they automatically know they're going to have to spend, $600 to $1,000, maybe more, depending on the car, to put new tires on it, because they can't sell a car with bald tires on their lot. At least you hope. At least a good dealer won't. So those are the types of things that they look at. How dirty is it? If your car has transported small children and their little cheddar fish crackers and their sippy cups, and you've got your Starbucks coffee that you've spilled all over it, if the inside of your car looks like, a hazardous waste dump, it's going to be worth a lot less money. They've got to really deep clean it. And they may decide it's not even worth it. They're like, that car is disgusting. I'm not even getting in it, much less keeping it for the lot. Boom, it's going straight to the auction. So always clean up your car before you resell it. So these are some of the things that go into, the reconditioning that they do on these vehicles. So most dealers tend to spend at least $1,000 on the used cars that they take in on trade and then resell for their lot. And then obviously they mark it up a little bit and make a profit. So that's the difference between wholesale and retail. So what can you do to make sure that you get the most money for your trade? We've talked about selling it to the right dealer in the first place, the dealer that is most likely to want to keep it for their lot and needs good quality cars for their lot. But even if you're not selling your car right away, you're not planning to get a new car for, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, that's fine. There is a lot you can do right now to make sure that it has maximum resale value when you do get to that point in time that you want to trade it in or sell it. Number one, keep it in good mechanical shape. I mean, you should be doing that anyway. This is your car. It's a safety. It's an important tool to get you to work. Always keep your car in top mechanical condition and keep your records. Get a file folder, stick all of your records in there, put it in your filing cabinet at home. Because if you can show the dealer, hey, here are all my service records. They're like, oh, wow, okay. That means more to a private party purchaser. So if you stick your car on Auto Trader or Craigslist and sell it to a private individual, if you can show them that folder, that makes a big difference to a private buyer. A dealer's not going to take your service records, and then give them to another retail customer. That would violate your privacy and be dangerous. But it does show them, hey, I've taken good care of this car and I take it very seriously. Same with keeping it in good cosmetic condition. Clean your car on a regular basis. It's a lot easier to kind of keep it clean than to let it get really nasty and grungy and all those goldfish crackers get kind of crushed into the carpet or stain the fabric. Keep it clean, and it's going to show better when it comes time to resell the car. And cars that look good are worth more money. The dealers are people too, and they look and see bright, shiny object or dull, grungy object. So don't be a dull, grungy object. And then make sure that, when you're finally shopping around and you're looking for about how much is my trade worth, there's no problem with looking at Kelley Blue Book. I've said it doesn't really mean squat, but I actually go into the auction sites and see what are these cars selling for at auction. But I have access to those because of the nature of my business. As a consumer, that is not an option for you. So the different book values are really all you have to work with. So pull several of them. Go ahead and pull Kelley Blue Book. Just be sure to, kind of look at that fair trade value as the estimate. Pull Black Book. Black Book, it's another book. It was originally designed for dealers, and it used to be a little tiny black book that they mailed to us every 2 weeks that was based on auction data. So it used to be more accurate than Kelley Blue Book, which has always been designed for consumers. But you can go to, Google Black Book online, and there's a lot of websites that will give you the Black Book value. Similarly, the NADA, the National Automobile Dealers Association website, they have values. A lot of dealers base their trade values on NADA. So if you're looking at multiple sources and then kind of combining that data, it'll give you at least a rough range of what your car may be worth. But the only way to truly know is to drive it around town and get some quotes from some different dealers. You can take it to CarMax if you have one in your area and get a quote from them. Just be aware that sometimes their quotes are really good. If you've got an older, higher mile car, a lot of times CarMax can put a better value on it because they have their own auctions. So it doesn't cost them as much money to wholesale a car at auction than it does another dealership because they've got their own lane. Sometimes they do it out their own back door. And honestly, I've seen them miss stuff. So it never hurts to get a quote from them. But be aware that if you have, a nice, 2 to 3 year old gently used car, they're not going to give you as much for it because they have to have a bigger margin of markup to sell their cars. So, if you've got a 2 or 3 year old Honda, don't bother taking it to CarMax. They will lowball you. Take it around to a couple of the Honda stores. But, if you've got a 10-year-old Buick, heck yeah, see what CarMax will throw on it. They might surprise you, in which case it's worth it. So I hope that was helpful in giving you an idea of what your trade is really worth. And if the dealer does not offer you full Kelley Blue Book value, don't assume that he's just lowballing you or trying to cheat you. It's just not true. The book values are just estimates, and you may not be looking at the right value, and all the different websites kind of come up with different ranges. So I know it can be very confusing, but ultimately your used car is worth whatever someone will actually stroke you a check for. And the only way to know that for certain is to shop it around. Thanks so much for joining me today, folks. And as I said, in 2 weeks, we'll do the second part of this day in the life of a used car and talk about what to do when you are shopping to purchase a used car for yourself, what to look for, some of the pitfalls, and how to avoid buying a lemon. Until then, folks, drive safely. I'm out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, the Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or the Car Chick.